I'm gonna have all of you guys practice the far inside rut. What's nice about the far inside rut is it actually starts way back here. So this rut really begins right here. And it carries all the way pretty much right where he is with the black shirt and the black hat and the camera. I mean, it carries even beyond where he is. So generally speaking, this is a long rut, and one that usually people would avoid because it is that long. So a couple of key tips. On the entry, front and rear brake to get that bike to slow down should all be done from the time you get to the roller to where this rut begins. We cannot be on the rear brake past the entry point of this rut. That's going to be the first point where you guys are like, oh, really? That seems odd. If we're hitting the rear brake at any point once we get settled into this rut and it's starting to arc, what is it going to do to the motorcycle? What's going to do that lean angle? It's going to stand the bike up and it's going to make you want to ride up and out of the first part of this rut, somewhere along the line. So that's going to be step one, is really getting that braking complete way earlier than what maybe you would think is appropriate. So we'll have to really key that up ahead of time and brake accordingly. Front and rear brake without the clutch to be done after the roller, but before this point. So after the roller, before this point is what I would call your braking zone. Another thing you guys are likely going to have to account for is a downshift or two, right? I mean, what speed are we coming down the straightaway in? Probably fourth for a lot of us. Hitting this corner in third for a lot of us, probably. So a single downshift. Likely that single downshift should happen on the roller, so that way you get it done nice and early and we're not scrambling for it too late. You could maybe save it a little later. I'll keep an eye on that, what looks appropriate. Stand until you get the flow. So that's going to be my advice to you guys right away. Most people would ignore this rut because they consider it too long of a rut and they feel like they can't balance through the entire thing. The reason a lot of people feel like they can't balance through this entire thing is because they sit right at the beginning of it and think that that's going to somehow make it easier. When you're sitting, you're a lot more attached to the bike. So when you're in a rut where you really need to let that thing lean back and forth underneath you, sitting isn't going to accomplish that. Standing up is what's going to accomplish that movement. So stand up the entire way, and I'll demonstrate, the entire way through this rut the first time through. Maybe the second time through, maybe the third time through, until you get comfortable and figure out exactly what speed you should hit it and what gear you should hit it in. And just the characteristics of the rut in general, right? Like right here, you can see it's kind of caved in on itself a little bit. Gain that confidence standing. Then reverse engineer the process. So what I mean by that is then you can start sitting, but don't sit until the 90% mark in the corner. So maybe when you do sit for that first time, don't do it until way the heck out here. Maybe sit here. Do that once or twice, get comfortable. Then back it up, sit at the 80% mark, then 70%, then 60%, then 50%. You'll feel a point that is your sweet spot, and you'll find your point of preference within that. The rule of thumb is you cannot sit until you're done braking or until you're past the last bump. What's nice about this section is that there isn't really any bumps yet, and your braking is done so early because the rut starts so early that it gives you complete freedom to choose where you want to sit down here. But that's the way that you do it. Stand up the whole way, then sit at the end and reverse that process. It might take you 4 or 5 times, 4 or 5 laps to really figure out that sweet spot of where you should sit. For me, just based on the characteristics here, see how it's deep right there? See how it goes really shallow right here? And then it goes deep again here? My guess is I wouldn't sit until I get here. I wouldn't want to sit here because I'd be afraid that putting that weight down into the front end, my front end would go push right through this. I wouldn't want to sit too early because then I'd put the weight into the bike too deep. And this rut's pretty deep, so I would feel like I would really catch the foot pegs as I come through here. So wanting to stand up, keep the toes tight through the deep part, stand up through the part where it gets shallow and you're at risk of washing out, and then sit down right in the nice hook at the end. What's up, guys? I'm giving away my custom built in Italy CR150. This bike was built from the ground up. It's one of a kind, and I'm giving it away to a lucky subscriber inside of the Moto Academy app. Go to the motoacademy.com, subscribe before June, and we'll be picking one lucky winner to take this bad boy home. Not much clutch needed, if any, in this corner. We really want to stay away from the clutch as much as humanly possible, but find that sweet spot of a gear to where, like, you're not screaming it, you're not lugging it. You want to be right in the meat of the power. Any questions at all? I'm going to do a few demonstrations so you guys can see, because I just did a sight lap. I haven't really come through this corner yet. Sorry, Grant, I didn't talk once. I totally forgot. Okay, so one note, your forks are stupidly soft. Like, your bike, when I hit the brakes, I'm like this, so I can't even really hit the brakes. So I now understand what you're feeling the whole time. You've got to squat that rear a lot more, maybe put a softer spring rate on the rear, drop the sag, or stiffen the front end up a bit. Because could you guys see when I would enter? And I was being very careful not to brake aggressive, but it was stink bug, really front end low. It feels nice and plush, but I can't be aggressive because it's too much like this. What were a couple observations about the way that I approached that turn? Even the third or fourth time through, where did I sit? I sat like halfway to 3/4 of the way through the last hook in the corner. I am light on my feet, standing nice and smooth through here. All of my braking, just like I suspected, was done before I got into the rut. And then I'm actually lightly accelerating the whole time through the rut. I don't know if you guys picked up on that. The reason I do that very gently, I'm talking like 3% throttle, it's just to keep the bike light. It's important on the 50s too. You come in here and just let off, you're gonna bury all that weight, you're gonna be catching foot pegs. Our foot pegs might hit, but as long as our feet are tight and we're keeping the momentum, just by a little bit of throttle going through, this won't snag you that bad. When I do decide to sit, a couple of things I'm doing. One, I'm sitting far enough forward on the bike so I can get that lean angle to where I want it. So sitting is usually one hand width from the front of the seat. So if you look down, you can get your butt situated about one hand width from the front of the seat is the sweet spot. And I'm really trying to be nice and proper right here, right? It's easy when you go to sit in that turn to fall inside of the bike. Very easy.
Are you trying to speed forward?
Am I what?
Are you trying to like sit forward when you're accelerating?
When I, like out of the turn now?
Yeah.
When I go to accelerate out of the turn, the only thing I do is I just pinch shoulder blades to bring chest forward. So I come here. And then I stand up a little bit, ever so slightly as I go up over the first roller coming out of the turn. That way I don't like jump it into nothing, right? I want to make sure the bike sticks on that part so I can get and I upshift there too. So from third to fourth, I get my upshift right when I crest this first part. Then did you hear the last time I went through the rollers, how quick and smooth it was, but how little throttle I was actually on the gas? That's because I short shifted to fourth and then just, very low RPM. All of the rollers is controlled with the clutch. What the clutch does is it keeps my front end extremely precise so I can drop it exactly where I want to. Create more power if I need to or kill the power if I need to, but placing the front tire exactly where I want. What most people probably do on those rollers, I can guess already, is this. Right in the face of each one, right?
Do you always have your finger on the clutch no matter what?
Always, yeah, always. Always on the front brake too. I like to just ride like this as much as possible. It helps me just square up. It just helps keep me in that rider triangle. But the clutch, I never realized how much I used the clutch until I started riding the Stark, which I then had a handbrake here. And so I'd be pulling the rear brake in at all of these crazy times where I'm like, oh wow, I never even thought about it. I'm using the clutch here. And that rollers would be a good example of it's all controlled with the clutch to be able to get that loft the way I do. And then also with the footwork, right? Yeah. See how nice and soft and gentle it looks when I go through those rollers? It's because I'm on the balls of my feet just letting that bike work underneath me.
Kind of like steering the bike with your legs?
Yeah, and Cincerello does that really good. Like when you see Cincerello, he'll like scrub the landings of jumps sometimes or like scrub things or soak it up and really use his knees. That's what I do through there. And it absorbs all of it, makes it really smooth and fun. Any questions at all?